Aloha everyone, welcome back to the Gun Talk, where we explore the world of firearms and related topics. I'm Flying Hawaiian. Today we're diving into a subject that sparks curiosity, controversy, and sometimes even fear: firearms. Now, right up front, let be clear: this episode isn't about teaching you how to use a firearm. Instead, it's about understanding them, because whether you're never held one or you grew up around them, firearms have played a huge role in history and in technology and in culture. And honestly, they're fascinating machines when you break them down, how they actually work. So today we're going to explore what a firearm really is, the science that makes it possible, the different types, and how they evolved, and why safety and responsibility are such a significant part of the conversation. All right, let's get into it. What is a firearm? So let's start super simple. Okay. At its core, a firearm is just a tool, a machine that controls the explosion to launch a projectile, usually a bullet through a barrel that it uh, that it has. But what makes a firearm so impactful in human history is that this machine takes something as small as a spark and turn it into a massive force into a fraction of a second. Even modern firearms is built around three essential parts. The action is the engine of the firearm. It is the mechanism that loads the ammunition, fires it, and gets ready for the next slot. The action, some of you also may know, is also a slide right here. This slide is what cycles back, loads the round or chamber of the round and everything, and holds the firing pin. The firing pin is what strikes the bullet to make it fire. Okay. Next is the barrel. This is the barrel. This is where the uh, ammunition loads into right here, and then the bullet travels down through this tube right here. So going in a straight line. So most people do is point and shoot and travel straight line. It doesn't do none of this fancy things like you see in the movie Wanted. Next part is the ammunition, which itself contains a pack of energy, and the ammunition has its four parts. Here's the bullet. The bullet, that's the part that actually leaves the barrel. Okay, the casing is basically considered that container that holds everything together. Then you have the gunpowder. That's the fuel, the explosive material, and the primer, a tiny chemical compound that ignites the gunpowder when struck. Think of it a way as the firearm itself is the machine, ammunition is the fuel that powers it. Now, the idea isn't firearms isn't new. In fact, it goes back to the 13th century of China, where the very first hand cannons were developed. Imagine a metal tube filled with black powder and some small stones or bits of metal. You light it with a fuse, and if you were lucky, it would send those projectiles flying in a direction you wanted. Crude, absolutely. Dangerous to the user, for sure. However, it was a revolutionary because it demonstrated for the first time that chemistry could be harnessed and converted into direct power. That's where firearms began. But now let's fast forward how they actually work today. All right, picture this: you're holding a firearm, again, not as a user, But just imagine the process. You squeeze the trigger, what actually happens inside that machine. Here's the chain reaction step by step, okay? When you pull the trigger releases a small piece of metal called the firing pin. Actually, to be straight out, it releases this, it pulls the sear releases the firing pin strikes the primer at the base of the cartridge. So, this little brown spot right there, and this brown spot right there, that's the primer. That's where the firing pin actually hits. Okay, that's how where it hits to ignite the gunpowder. Once the primer is struck, it ignites, creating a spark, a little explosion right there. It ignites the gunpowder. Gunpowder burns. It burns so fast that when uh once it gets to a certain pressure, it then sends the bullet down the barrel. It passes through the rifling, and what the rifling is little grooves inside the barrel that spins the bullet into like a spiral motion, like how you will throw a football field or throw a football. Okay, and that spins it, makes it a little bit more accurate when you're hitting a target. Okay? Finally, once the bullet exits, the casing is now ejected out of the firearm, and the firearm reloads the next round. So when all that happens in thousands of a second, from before you can blink your eye, it's already cycled through. Okay. Now, if we step back from the mechanics, what really happens, just physics and chemistry, you're converting chemical energy, the burning of the power, into kinetic energy, the motion of the bullet. Now, here's a fun comparison. Think about a car engine. Okay, you put gasoline in your car. Well, you get a spark that explodes the fuel that pushes the piston, and which eventually turns the wheels. A firearm is similar to that. You put your gunpowder, put in your gunpowder. You create a spark. There's an explosion. The explosion pushes a bullet instead of a piston. Now, one difference though: speed. The average bullet from a modern rifle leaves the barrel at something like 2,500 feet per second. It depends on the bullet. It varies. Okay, that's faster than the speed of sound. In fact, when a bullet breaks the sound barrier, it creates a sonic boom, which is the part of why gunfire sounds the way it does. And the engineering behind all of this is just about brute force. It's about precision. Or it's not just about brute force, it's really about precision. That rifling inside the barrel, for example, is one of the biggest breakthroughs in the firearm history. Without the bullet, without it, bullets will wobble in the air like a football thrown with a bad spiral. With rifling, they just stay straight and accurate over hundreds of yards. So when we say firearms are powerful machines, that's not just about the energy they release. It's just about the fine-tuned engineering that controls it. Now that we know how they work in general, let's talk about the different kinds of firearms, because not all guns are built the same way, and each type has a specific purpose. So let's start with handguns. Handguns, these are small, designed to be held in one hand. You got the two main types. Revolvers have a rotating cylinder that holds the ammunition. Think of a old cowboy movie, the classic six shooter. Pistols, which are usually a semi-automatic, which means fire one round per trigger pull and reload themselves automatically from a magazine. So, all you guys, all you anti-gun people, that's a semi-automatic. One trigger pull, one round. Handguns are portable, easy to carry, and they are generally less accurate at long distance because of their short barrel. Next up, rifles. These are long barrel firearms designed for accuracy. The longer the barrel means the bullet is stabilized for a longer time period. As it leaves the gun, the rifling we talked about really shines here. Rifles are used for hunting, sport shootings, and of course by militaries. And then you got shotguns. Shotguns don't usually have rifle barrels. They are smooth inside. Instead of firing a single bullet, they often fire a dozen of tiny pellets called shot that spreads out in a cone. As they travel, they make them what that makes them powerful at close range, but less effective at distances. They can also fire a single large projectile known as slugs for increased accuracy. So there's three categories: handguns, rifles, and shotguns. Each one works the same basic principle. Primer primer ignites powder, powder pushes the bullet. Here's a neat way to think about all of this. A revolver is like a pocket watch: mechanical, simple, reliable. Rifle is like a telescope combined with an engine, precise and focused. And a shotgun is more like a hammer, straightforward, close up, and impactful. Okay. All right. We've discussed what firearms are and how they function, but here's the thing: they don't just appear fully formed. The history of firearms is a story of slow, steady evolution. The earliest firearms, those crude hand cannons from the 13th century of China, were barely more than a metal tube. By the 15th and 16th century, in Europe, we started to see muskets, long guns with smooth barrels. Muskets were slow to load. You'll also have to pour powder, stuff a lead ball, ram it down with a rod, but they gave armies a huge advantage. The catch, they were wildly inaccurate at best. You could hit something the size of a barn at 100, maybe 100 yards, but that's pretty much all they really do unless it's close range. Then we enter rifling, cutting a spiral grooves inside the barrel. Gunsmiths figured out how to spin the bullet, stabilizing it in flight. Suddenly, you could hit a man-sized target at several hundred yards. That that one innovation changed everything, especially in war. So let's fast forward to the 1800s. Along comes the revolver. Samuel Colt designed lets shooters fire multiple rounds without reloading. Imagine the culture shock. Suddenly, one person could fire six shots in a matter of seconds. That's part of why revolvers became a symbol in the Wild West. Then came the semi-automatics in the late 19th, early 20th century. Instead of having the instead of having to cock the hammer or reload manually, these guns use the energy of the previous shot to load the next round automatically. Fire one shot, the gun itself gets itself ready for the next round. And of course, eventually engineers developed fully automatic firearms, which keeps firing as long as you hold the trigger. Those designs used by militaries were revolutionary in the 20th century. So, as we recap, you have semi-automatics that we explained, one shot, one triggerable, and fully automatic, that is, pull the trigger, fires until the magazine's empty. Those are used by the military, not for civilians. So if you zoom out, the story of firearms is a story of consistent refinement. Faster reloads, more reliable, more accurate, from hand cannons to high precision fire rifles. Each step reflects human integrity or ingenuity, not integrity, ingenuity. Oh, now let's shift gears because we're talking about firearms without talking about safety would be incomplete. Here's the truth: firearms machines, but they're also dangerous tools if handled carelessly, which is why firearms community emphasize what are known as the four universal uh, gun safety. First one, we'll go through them. The first one is treat every firearm as if they were loaded. Even if you know they're if it's empty, act like it isn't. That means when you pick up a firearm, check it, make sure it is clear, make sure it's there's no ammunition. Okay, especially when you're cleaning your firearm, breaking it down, or transporting it. Make sure it is free of ammunition. Never point it. Number two is never point it at anything you're not willing to destroy. That keeps accidents from becoming tragedies. So when you handle a firearm, make sure your trigger is off so that way no accidents can happen. Okay. Now, the third one, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. It sounds simple, but it's the biggest causes of accidents. Same thing with the two things are the biggest. Keep your finger off the trigger and never point at anything you're not willing to destroy. So don't handle the firearm and point it at your leg because I don't think you want to injure yourself. Keep it pointed at a safe direction and keep your finger off the trigger. 4. Be sure of your target and what's beyond it. Bullets don't stop at the target. It continues going. What's behind it? It matters. Okay. These rules are short, but they're powerful. And the reason they're so universal is that they cover just about every possible situation. Here is an interesting perspective. Even professionals, law enforcement members, military members, competitive shooters, they rehearse these rules consistently. Why? Because the moment you forget res- respect for the tool, mistakes happen. So why? So while the mechanics of the firearm are fascinating, the culture of responsibility that surrounds them is just as important. Okay. Firearms aren't just machines, they're also culture symbols. And depending on where you are, they can mean very different things. In sports, for example, firearms are about precision and discipline. Think about the Olympics shooting events or Bathalion, where athletes ski across miles of snowy terrain, then stop to fire at tiny targets. That takes incredible control. And hunting, firearms have been long been tools for providing food, and in many cultures, they've tied to a tradition and family. And of course, popular culture, movies, TV, video games, firearms are often become characters in their own right. Think of the cowboy revolver or the spy silence pistol. Their storytelling shorthand for power, danger, or control. But here's the tricky part: firearms are also deeply political. See, some of them as essential tools for self-defense or a symbol for freedom. Others see them primarily as a source of danger. And that's why understanding the mechanics matter. Because when you strip away the politics and the emotion, what you're left with is a machine. A firearm isn't magic. It's not a symbol. It's chemistry, it's physics, and engineering. But understanding how it works, you can have a clear, more grounded conversation about what role it should or shouldn't play in society. So, what we have covered today. We started with the basics: what a firearm is, what the main parts that make it work. We walked through the science of what happens when you pull the trigger. We also explored the different types of firearms: rifles, handguns, shotguns, and we looked at how designs evolved over centuries and innovations. We also talked about the universal safety rules and why responsibility is such a crucial part of firearm culture. And finally, we zoomed out to the bigger picture: how firearms sit at the crossroads of sports, history, culture, and society. But at the end of the day, a firearm is just a machine, but it's a machine that has shaped wars, cultures, and even national identity. Understanding how it works doesn't mean glorifying it. It means being informed. And in today's culture, where conversations about firearms are everywhere, that knowledge really does matter. So, thank you for listening to the Gun Talk. If you enjoyed this deep dive, considering sharing it with a friend, subscribing to the channel, and commenting down below. It helps more people discover the show. And remember, knowledge is power, but safety is responsibility. I'm Flying Hawaiian, and I'll catch you at the next episode.